Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. Raw emotion has a way of slipping out when you least expect it, like the tremble in your chest when you realize you've been living half awake, chasing goals that never truly stretched you, settling into patterns that keep you safe but never alive. There comes a moment when the quiet voice inside says enough that you were not born to be average, not meant to move through life as a shadow of what you could be. That moment, fragile and powerful, is the spark that the 10X rule was written to ignite. Grant Cardone, the man who shaped this fire into words, did not inherit greatness. He built it with bruised hands and relentless grit. He speaks with the urgency of someone who has seen both the emptiness of failure and the roar of extraordinary achievement. His voice is sharp, but beneath it is a pulse of compassion. He isn't trying to impress you. He is trying to wake you. And when he tells you that success requires action 10 times greater than you think is necessary, it isn't exaggeration. It's the unvarnished truth of a man who discovered that the world doesn't reward effort, it rewards excess effort, disproportionate energy, audacity that borders on madness. The heart of this rule begins with the recognition that ordinary effort creates ordinary results. People calculate just enough, plan just enough, dream just enough, and then they are surprised when their lives are filled with just enough. But the 10X rule shatters that glass ceiling. It says, dream 10 times bigger, act 10 times harder, risk 10 times more, and life will bend in ways you didn't think possible. It is not about balance or moderation, but about burning through mediocrity with the kind of intensity that rewrites what you thought your limits were. Most people underestimate two things in life: the obstacles they will face and the effort it will take to overcome them. That is why they fall short. They make plans that are too small, expectations that are too safe, and they move with the kind of energy that only carries them to the middle. Grant Cardone doesn't let you hide behind that illusion. He insists that if you want something extraordinary, you cannot calculate based on average effort. You must calculate based on a multiplier that shocks you, stretches you, and terrifies you. The 10X rule is not about dreaming. It's about recalibrating your entire existence so that dreaming and doing become inseparable. Think of it this way. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain. Most people look up and plan a climb to the first ridge, telling themselves that reaching halfway is already an accomplishment. They pack lightly, they move slowly, and when the weather turns, they retreat, convincing themselves that at least they tried. But the 10X mindset is different. It looks at the same mountain and says, not only will I reach the top, I will prepare for avalanches, storms, exhaustion, and even the possibility of failing 10 times before I make it. The climber who plans for 10 times the struggle, 10 times the risk, and 10 times the endurance does not just climb higher, they become unshakable when the storm arrives. That's what this book is training you for. Not only the victory, but the inevitable storms on the way. One of the most piercing truths here is that success is not your natural state. It is not something that happens just because you are talented or because you wish for it. Success is unnatural. It must be forced into existence. It must be fought for, demanded, pursued with the kind of passion that makes people think you've lost your balance. Because mediocrity is always waiting at your door, whispering to you to slow down, to rest, to accept what you have. And if you listen to that voice, if you allow yourself to be lulled by its comfort, you will wake up one day, surrounded by the ashes of wasted potential. Cardone speaks of massive action, and those words are more than motivational jargon, they are the antidote to hesitation. Massive action means doing what others consider excessive, unreasonable, or even obsessive. It means waking earlier, working longer, showing up more often, making more calls, writing more words, creating more opportunities than anyone thinks is rational. And yet, when you look at the people who have shaped history, isn't that exactly what they did? Think of Thomas Edison, who failed thousands of times before the light bulb finally held its glow. Think of Elon Musk, pouring his fortune into rockets that exploded until one finally reached the sky. These people were not moderate. They were massive. They embodied the 10x spirit long before it was given a name. And you, who are listening right now, you know in your heart that moderation has not brought you where you want to be. You know the quiet hunger that gnaws when you see others living at a level you once thought was out of reach. You know the ache of untapped strength. The 10x rule is not telling you that you are broken. It is reminding you that you are stronger than you've dared to admit. That your problem was never lack of potential, it was lack of scale. You've been playing in small numbers when your life was meant to roar in multiplication. There is a mantra that Cardone weaves into this philosophy. Set targets that are 10 times bigger than what you think you want, and then take actions that are 10 times greater than what you think are necessary. This is not exaggeration. It's a formula, because when you aim small, you fall smaller. But when you aim 10 times larger, even if you fall short, you land in a place that most people never reach. This is the radical shift. No longer calculating for safety, but for greatness. There is a danger in the way most people think about goals. They tell themselves to be realistic, to stay grounded, to reach for something within their grasp. They say it's better to aim small and achieve it than to aim high and risk disappointment. But Grant Cardone dismantles this belief with a fierce truth. Realistic goals are prisons. They lock you inside a framework of limitation, keeping you caged in what you already know you can do. And when you reach them, what happens? A moment of fleeting satisfaction, followed by the emptiness of realizing nothing in you has grown. Nothing in you has been forced to rise. Realism, in this sense, is not wisdom. It is surrender dressed up as practicality. The 10x mindset asks you to abandon that cage and set goals so large they scare you, so expansive they wake you in the middle of the night. The fear you feel when you think of them is proof that they matter. Think of the people whose names echo through history. They were not aiming for realistic. Martin Luther King Jr. did not say, "Let's slightly improve civil rights." He dreamed of a radical transformation. Steve Jobs did not aim for a better phone. He envisioned a revolution in the way humans interact with technology. These figures remind us that only those willing to stretch the edges of possibility change the world, while the rest stay trapped in circles of what's already been done. Grant also insists that fear is not a stop sign but a compass. The things that terrify you the most are often the very things that signal your growth. Fear, in the 10x philosophy, is not proof that you should retreat, but proof that you are on the right track. Because if your goals don't scare you, they are too small. Fear means you are entering territory that will transform you, territory where your old self cannot survive. And isn't that the whole point of growth, to shed the skin of what you were, so you can step into what you are becoming? There's a quiet moment that still lives in me, a memory of watching a friend sit in silence after failing at something they had dared to pursue. Their shoulders slumped, their eyes dimmed, and the air between us felt heavy. But then, almost imperceptibly, they lifted their head, and with a voice cracked but certain, they said, "At least I tried something bigger than myself." That moment burned into me, because it showed that even in failure, when you aim beyond reason, you walk away with more courage than you had before. It was never about the outcome, it was about becoming the kind of person who dares. Massive action, then, is not just about doing more. It is about redefining your relationship with effort itself. Most people stop when they are tired. Massive action says you stop when the mission is done. Most people make one attempt and retreat. Massive action says you keep moving until the wall breaks. It is about cultivating an energy that overwhelms resistance, persistence that dissolves excuses. And while others wonder why their dreams fade, you will be too busy creating momentum so unstoppable it feels like the world has no choice but to yield to you. But here is where the truth cuts deep. Massive action will make you misunderstood. People will call you obsessive, extreme, unbalanced. They will whisper that you should slow down, that you should enjoy life, that you are taking too much on. Yet every person who has broken barriers has faced those same whispers. They were told to stop, to rest, to lower their ambitions. And still, they pressed forward. Because here is the irony. Those who told them to slow down will one day stand in awe of the results they created. You, listening right now, you may already feel the weight of people's doubts pressing on you. Maybe you've been told you dream too big, that your pace is unsustainable, that your hunger is too much. But let me remind you of something. It is better to be judged for being too ambitious than pitied for being too afraid. Better to be called unreasonable than to quietly bury your potential under a blanket of average. Because the truth is, average never leaves a legacy. The world will always try to pull you toward the middle, to convince you that average is safe, that moderation is wisdom, that balance is the right way to live. But the 10x rule is a rebellion against that quiet erosion of your spirit. Average is not safe. Average is dangerous, because it lulls you into thinking you are progressing when in reality, you are standing still. When you live average, you attract average opportunities, average results, and average joy. And what is average joy but a muted version of the life you could have lived? Grant Cardone reminds us that mediocrity does not protect you from failure, it guarantees it, because in a world that demands resilience and reinvention, being average leaves you exposed, vulnerable, and replaceable. The shift he calls for is not subtle. It's a demand that you view yourself not as a small player in life's game, but as someone who has the right, the responsibility even, to dominate in your field, to stand out so fully that your presence cannot be ignored. Domination is a word that feels uncomfortable to many because it sounds aggressive, but Cardone reframes it as visibility, as ownership, as making yourself so essential, so consistent, and so bold that no one can look past you. To dominate is to claim your space unapologetically, to stop hiding behind humility that is really just fear in disguise, and to pour yourself into your work with such conviction that your mark becomes indelible. Think of the music of Beyoncé. She does not release a song, she orchestrates a movement. Think of Michael Jordan, who didn't just play basketball, but transformed it into a spectacle of relentless mastery. They are not remembered because they blended in. They are remembered because they operated at a scale that made them unavoidable. This is what the 10x rule whispers to you. Stop aiming to participate. Start aiming to dominate. Yet domination is not only external, it's also about dominating your own excuses, fears, and habits. Because the real battle isn't out there. It's within you. How many times have you told yourself you'll start tomorrow? How many times have you settled for good enough when deep down you knew you had more to give? Domination means you no longer negotiate with those inner whispers. You cut off the possibility of retreat. You burn the bridge back to mediocrity so thoroughly that the only way left is forward toward the larger life that is waiting for you. And here lies the emotional truth. Living by the 10x rule will not feel easy. It will stretch you until you think you might break. It will test your patience, your endurance, your faith. There will be mornings when the weight of your goals feels unbearable, when quitting would seem rational. But if you hold on, if you push through the discomfort, you will discover something rare, the version of yourself you were always meant to meet. Because comfort never introduces you to your higher self. Discomfort does. Struggle does. Relentless action does. You may feel like you've been moving through life as if it were a rehearsal, waiting for the perfect moment to act. But the truth is, this is the moment. There is no rehearsal, no second draft, no redo. There is only this one chance to live at full volume. That's why Cardone's mantra echoes like a heartbeat through these pages. Set goals 10 times bigger. Take actions 10 times bolder. Because your life is too precious to be lived at the level of almost. There is a point in every pursuit where exhaustion collides with doubt, where you begin to question not just your ability, but the very worth of the goal itself. It's that heavy, lonely middle ground between the excitement of starting and the glory of finishing. Most people stop there. They tell themselves the timing isn't right, the dream was too big, or maybe they weren't meant for it. But this is exactly where the 10x rule matters most, because it reframes that doubt not as a signal to quit, but as proof that you're finally stretching far enough. You see, if your journey never brings you to your knees, you probably never aimed high enough. Cardone talks about persistence not as a trait of the talented, but as a decision of the relentless. Success, he insists, is not about who is smartest, luckiest, or most connected. It's about who refuses to back down when the wall doesn't move after the first 100 pushes. Persistence is an identity you choose, a muscle you build by refusing to let go. And when you choose it, something miraculous happens. Life begins to bend, obstacles begin to crack, and the very world that resisted you begins to respond. This doesn't mean the struggle disappears. It means you stop interpreting struggle as failure and start interpreting it as progress. The roadblocks you hit are not dead ends. They are the training grounds where resilience is forged. Imagine water pressing against rock. At first, the rock looks immovable, indestructible, but drip by drip, wave by wave, the water carves a canyon. That is the power of persistence multiplied by time. That is the spirit of 10x. Yet Cardone doesn't just speak of persistence as endurance. He speaks of it as intensity. To persist in the 10x way is not to barely hold on, but to charge again and again with renewed ferocity. It's not about waiting patiently for results. It's about assaulting your dreams with such sustained effort that the universe has no choice but to notice. People may call it obsession, but obsession is simply what it feels like when you care enough to keep going beyond reason. And in this philosophy, excuses have no place. Every time you say, "I didn't have the time, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the support," you hand over your power. The 10x rule demands full responsibility, a radical ownership of your outcomes. Even when things are outside your control, your response is always within it. And when you take ownership of every result, you stop waiting for life to happen to you and start happening to life. That shift alone, stepping out of victimhood and into authorships, is enough to change the trajectory of everything you touch. But let's pause here, in this raw center, where the struggle feels most real. Because maybe as you hear these words, you feel the sting of your own disappointments, the weight of goals left unfinished, the shadow of dreams you once carried but dropped along the way. I want you to know this. It is not too late. The fact that you are listening right now means the fire has not gone out. It may be small, it may flicker in the wind, but it is alive, and alive is enough. The 10x rule is not a judgment of what you failed to do. It is an invitation to what you still can do. The closer you lean into this way of living, the more you realize that extraordinary results are never accidents. They are engineered through choice, multiplied through scale, and protected through discipline. The 10x rule makes it clear that success is not some mystical alignment of star. It is the natural byproduct of relentless, oversized action. When you do 10 times more, you plant 10 times more seeds, and while not all of them will grow, enough will rise to create a harvest greater than you imagined. That is how empires are built, not by cautious steps but by abundant planting. Grant Cardone reminds us that competition is not the ultimate goal. If you spend your life trying to outdo others by small margins, you will always remain chained to their pace. The 10x rule calls for domination, for breaking out of the narrow lane of comparison. It's not about being slightly better, it's about becoming so bold, so visible, so expansive that you operate in an entirely different arena. Think of Amazon in its early years. While bookstores competed for shelf space, Amazon redefined the very concept of the store. That is 10x thinking. It doesn't ask how to do what others are doing slightly better. It asks how to do what others won't even dare to imagine. At the same time, this mindset strips away the illusion that life will ease up when you achieve more. In fact, the opposite is true. The more you grow, the more challenges you invite. But instead of resisting that truth, Cardone teaches you to embrace it. He tells you to expect problems, to plan for setbacks, to assume that difficulty is the natural companion of ambition. When you prepare for 10 times the resistance, you stop being surprised by it. You meet obstacles with calm ferocity because you already knew they were coming. And when others fold under pressure, you keep moving because you train for storms, not sunshine. There is also something deeply human in the way Cardone speaks about urgency. He doesn't waste time romanticizing patience as passivity. He tells you flatly, act now, move now, do not wait. Because waiting is the enemy of momentum, and momentum is everything. You know this in your own life. Think of the times you delayed, convinced yourself to start next week, promised yourself a better tomorrow. How many of those tomorrows arrived empty? But when you act immediately, when you seize the flicker of energy before it fades, you create sparks that grow into flames. Urgency, multiplied by massive action, is a force that reshapes the landscape of your life. And yet, beneath all this intensity lies a message that is almost tender. You are capable of far more than you believe. You have been misled by your own doubts, shackled by the low expectations of others, seduced by the false comfort of mediocrity. The 10x rule is not about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering the parts of you that were always waiting to be unleashed. There is a version of you that can outwork fear, that can outlast exhaustion, that can outdream limitation. That version is not a fantasy, it is real, and it is waiting for you to decide. When you begin to live by this principle, something extraordinary happens. You stop measuring your actions by how tired you feel and start measuring them by the size of the life you want to create. Fatigue no longer becomes a finish line. It becomes a signal that you are still alive, still moving, still building something that matters. The 10x rule teaches you that ordinary energy produces ordinary days, but extraordinary energy multiplies time itself. When you do 10 times more, you collapse the timeline between where you are and where you long to be. What might take others 10 years, you compress into 2. That is not magic, T is math. Effort, compounded, always accelerates outcomes. But the beauty of this philosophy is that it does not simply live in the abstract, it asks you to translate it into your daily life. If you want 10 times more health, it means not just a single workout, but a lifestyle of movement, nutrition, and rest magnified. If you want 10 times more wealth, it means not just making one investment, but creating streams, building skills, and multiplying value. If you want 10 times more love, it means not just giving occasionally, but showing up with a level of presence and generosity that transforms the people around you. The 10x rule is not about one area, it bleeds into everything, asking you to upgrade not only your career, but your entire existence. And yes, there will be conflict inside you. A part of you will resist, will whisper that this is too much, that balance is better, that you deserve to coast. That inner conflict is normal. In fact, it's a sign you are standing on the edge of transformation. Because the moment you begin to desire more, to demand more, to act more, the smaller self you've been carrying will start to fight for its survival. It wants you comfortable, predictable, safe. But you cannot serve both safety and greatness. You must choose. And when you choose greatness, the discomfort you feel is simply the old self breaking apart, making room for the new. This is why Cardone tells you to lean into obsession. He says that obsession is a curse, it's a gift. Every person who has created something magnificent was obsessed. They thought about it in the shower, they dreamed about it at night, they woke up with fire in their chest. Obsession is not sickness, it is the purest expression of alignment between your energy and your vision. And when you let yourself be obsessed, you unlock a level of creativity and persistence that balance could never give you. The 10x life is not about moderation, it's about passion at full tilt, love poured without apology, effort given without restraint. And to you, the one listening quietly, right now, let me remind you, the hunger you feel is not foolish. The restlessness in your chest is not weakness. It is the soul's way of telling you that you were not meant to live muted. You are allowed to want more, to chase harder, to demand from life what others are too afraid to ask for. The very fact that you feel the pull towards something greater means you are already awake to your own potential. And once awake, you cannot go back to sleep. And here's where the transformation begins to take root, not in grand declarations, but in the smallest choices multiplied by a mindset of excess. Each morning when you wake up, you are faced with a decision. Will you act at the level of ordinary, or will you act at the level of extraordinary? The 10x rule insists that you no longer accept the minimum as enough. If the world expects you to make one call, you make 10. If it expects one attempt, you deliver 10. If it expects average preparation, you prepare 10 times more thoroughly. This is how you change the gravity of your life by refusing to play at the expected level. Grant Cardone speaks with the urgency of someone who knows time is short. He reminds you that the clock does not wait for your hesitation. Every day you delay, opportunities vanish, momentum decays, and energy dissipates. Success, he argues, is a duty, not an option. That may sound harsh, but what he means is that you owe it not only to yourself, but to everyone who depends on you. Everyone who watches you, everyone who will be touched by your life. When you shrink your effort, you shrink the possibility of what you can give. But when you expand your action tenfold, you expand your capacity to serve, to inspire, to provide, to uplift. This is why the 10x mindset is not selfish, it is profoundly generous. It forces you to live at a level where your success spills into the lives of others. And if you doubt this, think of the figures whose boldness has changed your world. Think of Oprah Winfrey, who rose from hardship not by moving carefully, but by moving relentlessly, creating platforms, seizing moments, amplifying her presence until she became a symbol of resilience and possibility for millions. Think of Elon Musk, whose audacious goals, colonizing Mars, electrifying transport, reinventing energy, were laughed at until his massive action turned the laughter into stunned silence. These are not people who live by moderation. They lived by obsession, persistence, and effort multiplied beyond measure. Yet Grant also makes a sobering point. The biggest mistake people make is not that they aim too high and fail, but that they aim too low and succeed. Let that sink in. To hit a small target is not an achievement. It is a tragedy because it means you never stretched into your potential. The danger of modest goals is not just their size, but the way they teach you to settle, to accept crumbs when you were meant for feasts. The 10x rule rescues you from that fate, reminding you that your future is too precious to be squandered on timid aims. So, where does this leave you in the quiet of your own life? It leaves you with a choice. You can continue as before, living at the level of effort that produces predictable results. Or you can step into the discomfort of the 10x life, where your days are longer, your actions are bolder, and your presence is impossible to ignore. The first path is easier, but it ends in regret. The second path is harder, but it ends in legacy. When you dare to embrace this philosophy, you begin to notice a shift in how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who reacts to life and begin to see yourself as someone who creates it. The 10x rule teaches that success is not reserved for the chosen few, it is reserved for the relentless few. And the difference is not talent, not luck, not even intelligence, but the scale of your effort. The world bends for those who refuse to let go. Those who show up so consistently and so massively that resistance eventually surrenders. But with this new identity comes a responsibility. Grant Cardone tells you plainly, you must stop underestimating the cost of inaction. Doing nothing is not neutral, it carries the heaviest price of all. Every moment you hesitate, every dream you defer, every chance you pass by because you thought you were not ready, these are debts that compound in silence. One day, you wake up and realize you've been paying interest on fear and hesitation for years. The 10x mindset refuses to pay that tax. It invests boldly, daily, knowing that the only real risk is in standing still. And yes, the road will test you. You will face criticism. You will encounter jealousy. You will even confront betrayal. Cardone does not shy away from this truth, he insists on it. He tells you to expect opposition, to prepare for it, and to let it fuel you instead of deter you. Because the presence of resistance is not proof that you're wrong. It's proof that you're making waves. Nobody criticizes the invisible. Nobody attacks the average. You are only targeted when you rise. and being targeted is evidence that you are moving into significance. This is why the mantra repeats itself like a drumbeat. Set targets 10 times bigger. Take actions 10 times bolder. It is not just a formula for success, it is a shield against discouragement. When you are operating at 10x levels, setbacks lose their sting because they are dwarfed by the scale of your effort. One failure cannot stop 1,000 attempts. One rejection cannot cancel 100 opportunities created. When your energy multiplies, obstacles shrink. And perhaps the most liberating truth of all is this: you don't need permission to live this way. You don't need approval, validation, or consensus. The 10x rule hands you the keys and says, drive. Others may not understand why you move the way you do, why you work the way you work, why you hunger the way you hunger. But their understanding is not required. Your life is not theirs to measure. Your potential is not theirs to limit. You were given this one chance, this one body, this one brief spark of time. Why dim it for the comfort of others? So the invitation becomes clear. To live by the 10x rule is to live urgently, abundantly, audaciously. It is to stop waiting for the perfect moment and instead create it. It is to replace doubt with action, hesitation with momentum, fear with courage, moderation with obsession. It is to live so fully that when the final curtain falls, you leave behind no question marks, no regrets, no half-lived chapters. Only the echo of a life that mattered, a life that multiplied, a life that burned at full flame. There is a quiet truth hidden in all this intensity. The 10x rule is not simply about what you achieve, but about who you become in the process. When you live at this level of effort, you begin to strip away the parts of yourself that were built on fear, hesitation, and doubt. You grow into someone who sees problems as puzzles instead of barriers, someone who welcomes difficulty as proof that they are on the right road. This transformation is not external, it is deeply internal. You may begin chasing wealth, success, recognition, but what you discover along the way is resilience, confidence, clarity, and a sense of power that no one can take from you. And in this new version of yourself, you stop apologizing for your ambition. You stop making yourself smaller so others feel comfortable. You stop pretending you are satisfied with average when everything in you cries out for more. You learn to stand tall in your hunger, knowing it is not greed but life itself calling you forward. Because the truth is, when you live at 10x levels, you inspire others to rise too. Your energy becomes contagious. Your persistence becomes an example. Your audacity becomes permission for others to dream beyond their limits. Cardone often reminds his readers and listeners that the world needs more people willing to live massively. Because mediocrity doesn't just affect the individual, it affects families, communities, entire generations. When you shrink, the opportunities you might have created vanish with you. When you settle, the people who might have been lifted by your success remain in shadows. Living by the 10x rule is not selfish, it is service at its highest form. You are not only multiplying your own life, you are multiplying possibility for everyone touched by your existence. So let's bring this close to where you are right now. What does it mean for you, sitting here with these words in your ears? It means starting where you are, not waiting for everything to be perfect. It means taking the dream you've been carrying and multiplying it by 10. Then asking what action you can take today that is 10 times bigger than what you planned. Maybe it's one more call, one more email, one more hour of practice, one more risk. Small steps, multiplied massively, create unstoppable momentum. And yes, there will be days when your spirit feels heavy. There will be mornings when you wake up weary, evenings when you wonder if the work is worth it. In those moments, remember this: the pain of pushing beyond average will pass, but the pain of regret will not. One day, your future self will look back and whisper, "Thank you for every act of courage, every moment of persistence, every refusal to quit." The 10x rule is not simply a book. It is a mirror, held up to the version of you that is waiting to emerge. It is a challenge, whispered into your heart. Will you settle for what is, or will you rise into what could be? The choice, as it always has been, is yours. And as we close this journey together, I want to leave you with a vision. Picture a single seed planted in the dark soil. Alone, it seems insignificant, fragile, easy to overlook. But given the right conditions, 10 times the water, 10 times the care, 10 times the sunlight, it grows into a tree that changes the landscape around it. That seed is you. That tree is the life you are meant to create. And the 10x rule is the call to give yourself the excess nourishment, energy, and persistence you need to grow beyond imagination. If these words stirred something in you, if they lit even the smallest flame, I invite you to carry them forward. And if this message resonated, I warmly encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Not for me, but because your voice matters. Your reflection, your story, your insight might be the very spark that helps someone else take their first step toward a life 10 times greater. Together, by sharing and engaging, we create ripples that reach further than any of us could alone.